I really look at getting fired as besides getting into IU, one of the best things that happened to me, because I had just fallen into kind of a, like, oh, this is easy, like I'm getting a good paycheck. The other stuff will come, but it wasn't going to come. I needed to get fired. I needed to get literally the fire lit under my ass, and I haven't had a day job since.
Listening to Inside Acting, a podcast dedicated to demystifying the inner and outer game of success in the entertainment industry. I'm AJ Meyer.
And I'm Trevor Algott, and coming up in episode 267 today, I sit down for part one of my chat with director Bryan Beasley to talk about his unique journey into the entertainment industry, all the way from Oklahoma through New York to LA, working for Sigourney Weaver, the gift of getting fired, and how it really all does come down to who you know and who knows you. There's no secrets in this one, guys. It's just good old-fashioned hustle, relationships, and commitment. Episode 267. Stay with us.
Support for this episode of Inside Acting is brought to you in part by Rehearsal Pro, the next version of Rehearsal, the essential app for actors. I've been using it a lot lately, guys. It's now available in the iTunes App Store. So if you want to learn your lines, be off book for your auditions, explore your character, make stronger choices, and do a whole lot more, go right now to rehearsal.pro/IAP to learn about all the great new features in the newest version of Rehearsal, the groundbreaking app designed by actors for actors. That's rehearsal.pro/IAP. Hello, sir.
Hey, you've had a busy couple weeks, man, between auditions and workshops and jobs.
Yeah, it's been good news. It's been good news.
We've actually got some good news just on the podcast front to get through real quickly here. Just some cool stuff that I think people will, hopefully listening, will appreciate. Number one, the Inside Acting podcast that you're listening to is now available on Google Play. So for our Android users and Google Play users and people who get all their podcasts through that channel, Inside Acting is now available there. So check it out. There's a link on our website. It'll be in the website show notes for every episode now on. And if that's the ecosystem you're plugged into now, Inside Acting is available there too. So that's cool. Number two, Gadali's Kickstarter, we're proud to report, was successfully funded. Boom shakalaka. I think he ended up raising almost $12,000, I think.
So cool.
So he's got a nice budget to create a great film with his award-winning director of a brother helming it. So I can't wait, man. Like we said before, Gadali's got a really unique skill set and sense of humor and unique taste, and I think he's going to create something really fun. So very excited for him and for that. And thank you. I was looking at the list of contributors. So many Inside Acting listeners jumped in and contributed to that.
That's so cool.
Proud daddy moment, you know?
I love, too, watching because we've sort of seen behind the curtain just a little bit with Alex Boylan, like just seeing the kind of, watching him utilize some of her tips and strategies and watching it sort of play out. And then it completely worked. I mean, it's funded, obviously, but it was, I don't know, that was really cool, like peek behind the curtain.
Totally. Yeah, if you're listening to this and you've got a crowdfunding campaign going on or one that you're thinking of starting, I can think of one listener, a longtime listener and supporter, Michael Lutheran, who's going to be starting his own acting-centric podcast called Hollywood Hustle. I've just seen it sort of battered about on Twitter. I don't know much about it, but I'm excited to hear more about it. I think his campaign kicks off on the 20th of the month, which is tomorrow as of this recording. So by the time you guys are hearing this, that campaign should be live. But if you are in a situation similar to that, check out Leah Savoli's episodes and Alexandra Boylan's episodes because they are all about creating your own work on a shoestring budget, creating successful crowdfunding campaigns. In the membership, there's a big summary of Leah's best tips for how to successfully crowdfund. So lots of resources there, hopefully, for people to take advantage of, to make their own work. And speaking of making your own work, there are two examples that were recently sort of brought to our attention here at Inside Acting HQ. And one of them comes from another longtime listener and supporter, Stephen Phillips, who has a really well-produced and funny show on the web called The Brothers Phillips that he does with his brother. And they did a special Valentine's Day episode a week or two ago and released it. And it's really high-quality stuff, really fun, really well done. He shared this with the podcast. And the same week, we had another listener write in named Robert Zazali. I hope I'm saying your last name right, Robert. But he created a web series called Right Hand Man, and it's about having a puppet and this guy getting back into dating, and it was also just so well done, and it was so cool to just see these people using not just one aspect of their talent and creativity and awareness, but all aspects of it, and creating an entire show that people can plug into. I mean, they're actively creating their own little corner of culture. And I love it. Both of these examples are great examples of actors taking the reins, creating really high quality, engaging stories that are showcasing their brand and their talent. And it just goes to show there's no excuses. So check out their work. Both of those links are in the show notes of this episode. So check them out. You can contact those guys, get your own project rolling. The membership is a great place to start brainstorming with people and seeing who knows who to get your project off the ground. But I wanted to highlight those because I'm just so inspired by what people are creating. And it's so cool that they write to us and say, thanks to your podcast, I went forward with this. I actually went ahead and made this. That was cool.
It's so cool. And we've got, a great follow-up guest to Bryan. We're still putting together the scheduling for the interview, but just someone who took a short film and used it as the tool for the sort of the dream scenario where they use it as a calling card to get themselves a really awesome high-end agent, used it as a way of leveraging interest and money for the feature-length film version of the short film. So we're getting back to a lot of this DIY stuff right now, and hopefully between the inspiration of the other listeners and some of these guests that we're sourcing for people, it will give people both the inspiration and the tools to make this kind of stuff happen.
Yeah, that's a great segue too, because speaking of DIY, I've always seen the way to sort of establishing yourself in this industry. I've seen it really this is a gross oversimplification, but seen it really as either, like I've said before, focusing on becoming a hired gun, an actor for hire. You get out there, you present your work, as Michael Kostroff says, you're an actor, you go around from place to place and you say, these are my services. How can I help you? And or you focus on creating your own content and become a producer actor, a writer actor, a director actor. And one of the ways that you would do the former, or one of the popular ways you do in the former, and we actually did a poll with our listeners not too long ago where most of our listeners said this was a necessary evil. But one of the ways to do it was to go to these paid casting director workshops, which we've talked about so many times in the show and hopefully featured both sides of the argument fairly and equitably. But it turns out, Jen brought this to our attention this week, that 5 of these casting workshops have now officially been charged by the LA City Attorney General and being basically pay-to-play scams. 5, including some big ones like the Actor's Key. It's kind of nuts. This is the kind of thing that people have been talking about for so long. Like, I can't wait till these things get shut down. And it always seemed like kind of a pipe dream. It was like, okay, get in line. But now it's actually happening. 5 of these major ones are getting charged. Charges are being broughton's a word now. Charges are being brought.
It is now.
Charges are being brought against 25 different people that are at the head of these organizations, these workshop organizations. I mean, it's kind of crazy. We've got links to both of these articles on our website. One of them is about a 1.5-minute video from the Hollywood Reporter. The other one's a statement from Mayor Eric Garcetti. Interesting stuff. Any thoughts on that, AJ? Anything you want to share on that?
I don't know. It kind of, after all the talk and bringing people onto the show and having the pro and against arguments, I guess my first instinct was like this. It just feels like so much like a big giant hammer coming down to squash a pretty, I don't know, maybe they're making money hand over fist. Maybe they're making millions of dollars. I don't know, but it doesn't seem that way. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. It just seems like big. It seems kind of epic, to charge 5 different businesses, 25 people at the top, and who knows what they're being charged. I mean, are these criminal charges? Are they civil charges? Like, what's going to happen? Are these people going to go to jail? Like, that seems excessive to me. I know, someone who's staunchly against it, like a Billy DeMoto, is probably like, really excited about this. But I don't know. It just, to me, it seems like a lot. That's the only description I can think of to kind of describe it.
Yeah, what comes up for me is this what David Lawrence was talking about when we featured his statement or viewpoint on this. And, he said, like, look, it happens in every industry all over the world. And if you shut it down at the sort of top level like they are right now, it's still going to happen in like a church basement somewhere or in some empty playhouse at some point. Actors are going to get together and offer to buy the friend of a friend who knows the casting director a pizza or a sandwich or something if they come and do a night with scenes, and it's just going to start all over again. And eventually it's going to become formalized. People will find ways around it. So the charges, I believe, are for violating the Krikorian Act, which I think went official in like 2010, 2011. And so, but I don't know. Are they going to go to jail or who knows? But clearly it was finally recognized as a very illegal thing to take advantage of actors in this way, whether you view it as taking advantage of actors or not. Apparently the law believes that that's the case.
And then, as Michael Donovan said when we had him on, I think this is going to cause other casting directors or even casting directors or casting workshop businesses to become extremely timid. The ones that some might argue are perfectly legitimate may end up being, like I said, they may end up shutting down or backing off because of fear of the same thing sort of happening to them. It's like, why, if we go with what you were just talking about, Trevor, the David H. Lawrence, the 17th, we always have to say his full name, with David's sort of argument about it, continuing to happen or happening in every industry, then are we going to start seeing them go after the types of trade shows, for instance, that David was referring to? Like if there's a trade show, the industry that David always uses is plumbing industry, right? So if there's a trade show for plumbers where it costs plumbers money to go to the trade show to then show their wares to potential customers, to Home Depot or something, right? Then does that mean that those are going to start getting shut down? Like, why is it happening and we're just not hearing about it? Or is it just that they're focused on this one particular thing because it makes headlines because we're in Los Angeles and it's the entertainment industry? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it brings up an interesting point because it's the difference between a class, something that is offered to the public as under the guise of education, and like a bona fide showcase where the actors pay to produce these scenes for an audience specifically of people that are there to, obviously hunt down new talent and sign or hire them. So I kind of see a little bit of a difference between the two.
What if, what happens if like, a director or an actor runs an acting studio where they teach acting classes, and then they happen to, direct a feature film or something, and then it's like, hey, it would be great for one of these roles is so-and-so from my class. Then is that sort of a conflict of interest? Is that a violation? Or do people let that slide because they're not a casting director? These are the questions that like come up for me. And once again, I'm not saying I'm not even arguing that what's happening right now is bad. I'm just saying that there are far too many. It's a far more complex issue than I think the Attorney General's office and the media and politicians want to make it. People want to make things so black and white, and I think we have discovered in the history of this podcast this issue has a lot of gray. There are more than 50 shades of gray in this issue. More. Imagine that. 50 shades grayer.
50 shades more gray.
50 more grayer shades than – but there's just a lot of gray in this issue. It's not black and white. And so that's why I'm raising these questions. even if it was just to play devil's advocate, even if I was for the film, I was like, yes, down with the workshops. I'm so glad this is happening. I think to be in the position that we are in, Trevor, with a microphone in front of us, I think it's our duty to ask these kind of questions.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about this till we're blue in the face, and we often do. I'm really curious to hear what our listeners think. If you guys have strong feelings on this one way or the other, especially now that like shit's going down, contact us. Leave us a voicemail, shoot us an email, shoot us a voice memo, anything at all, to sort of let us know where you stand on this issue. We'd really love to hear what other people in other parts of the industry with different perspectives have on this kind of thing, because we're a specific demographic. You and I, AJ, we're white dudes in our 30s in LA with similar backgrounds and training, and I don't know what it's like for somebody in a different market that's a different gender with a different look and different training. I want to hear what people think, so let us know, please, what we're leaving out of this conversation, what we're missing. Don't have a ton of time on this episode, but you've got a few things that have been going on. You had a trip out to did you have a trip out to the East Coast?
No, I'm leaving on Saturday.
And then you had a paid student film and for your first pilot audition. So catch us up on what's been going on in the world of AJ.
It's just been like a great busy week for being an actor for myself. I mean, it has been so far. I mean, I know it's mid-February, so not super surprised, and also, there's no such thing as pilot season anymore. Yeah. But haven't had a lot going on. First pilot audition of the season this week. Put myself on tape. Noticed that the production company, I know I've talked about this before, but I know someone who works for casting in Sony Pictures Television, and I sent this person an email and was like, hey, are you involved with this? And she was like, yeah, but why are you putting yourself on tape? The casting director is actually going to be in LA for a week. So got on the horn to the reps, and now I have an in-person audition. Got a great tape. It's ready to go. If anything, if we need sort of follow-up and we need to send it to New York, it's there, it's done, it's in the can, so to speak, but I get to do it in person now. And then I had an audition for a student film that actually pays, which is why I wanted to, I mean, that's the only reason I wanted to talk about it. It like blew my mind. I saw the appointment come through from my manager, and she was like, yeah, it may shoot in Texas, and if it does, they'll transportation and accommodations will be taken care of, and it also pays I think it's like $1,000 for a 4-day shoot. I'm like, for a student film, sign me up. So I just thought that was really, really cool. It also, I mean, to me, it says a lot. It's about we've talked about this before on the podcast, like pay me $100 a day, the whole respect thing. It shows respect for the actors, and it also says something to me about the quality of the production.
Yeah, level of commitment for sure. Yeah. Yes,
like I feel like there's going to be a DP, and they're going to have, good equipment, and they're going to have a sound person, and they're going to have, there's some special effects sort of stunt. There's a fire at the end of the, film. So I'm thinking like it's all going to be, handled really professionally. That maybe that's just me projecting, but if they're going to pay the actors, to me, that sounds like a strong possibility. So anyway, it was just really cool week. I don't know. It felt good. It feels good to be working.
Well, support for this episode of Inside Acting is also brought to you in part by vo2gogo.com, the award-winning voiceover training system and winner of Backstage's Reader's Choice Award for Best Voiceover Training 4 years in a row. Visit vo2gogo.com/start for a free Getting Started in Voiceover online class that'll help you add voiceover to your acting portfolio. It's a no-brainer. It's free. vo2gogo.com/start. And we have a quick question from Edgar. And this is really directed, I think, more towards you, AJ, because you're closer to the world of what Edgar's seeking out. He writes to us and says he loves the podcast. Thank you for your kind words, Edgar. But he says, I also work for Apple, which we both have worked for Apple. You still work for Apple, AJ. I no longer do. But he said, I also work for Apple, but I work on the East Coast. I'm trying to move to the West Coast and transfer to a store out there and make that my part-time job while I pursue a career in acting. But I wanted to ask you guys how you managed your Apple schedule to stay flexible enough to go on auditions. And this was actually a big reason I got fired from Apple. So,
yeah, I was going to say, you should probably start this answer because you are like the poster child for it not working out exactly.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other story. There were other sort of pieces of the puzzle there. But that was the ultimate
sort of politics.
Yeah, a lot of politics and changing of the guard and things like that. But that was ultimately the reason that was given for me leaving the company. But I know that things have changed at Apple a little bit, I think, with scheduling. How do you specifically make it work when auditions come up? What's that process look like for you?
Yeah, it's kind of funny that this is so specific. I would recommend this job to a lot of actors, actually, if they had any interest in just, excellent customer service-y retail kind of job. I mean, all the part-timers get benefits, health benefits. So I have health benefits, great benefits actually, and a lot of other benefits as well. You can't set your own schedule, but you can set your availability. Of course, the less you're available, the less you're going to work and the less money you're going to make. But I have created a availability for myself that allows me to also work at our other job, Trevor, which is at the theater. I have kept myself in I don't want to call it a lower level position, but in a position where there is a large pool of people that could cover or take or split a shift with me should an audition come up. Now, all of that is to make sure that I am the most important thing. This is what I learned, I would say, as I approached my late 20s. All of that is just about showing up and being an adult, right? I'm an adult. You're an adult. We can handle this. I would always come to them. This is the really important part. And this goes for any job that anyone out there has. I would always come to them with a solution instead of a problem. So if I found out at the last minute or whatever, or found out a few days in advance that I had an audition, I would not speak to a manager or anybody until I had some kind of solution in place, either somebody to cover my shift, somebody to come in a little bit early to cover the last hour of my shift, or something so I could leave early to get to this audition, whatever it was. And then I would go to a manager and say, hey, I have this audition, but I found so-and-so to cover this, to do that, blah, 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 blah. Is that okay? Yeah, of course. I've already solved the problem for them, right? They're like jazzed. So that goes for any job out there. Now, the other thing and the other reason why Apple might be a great option as a thrival job for somebody is recently they changed their time and attendance policy such that there really isn't a time and attendance policy. I mean, there is, but you don't really get demerits for like missing days and calling out and et cetera, et cetera. That being said, of course, there's going to be a conversation, right? If you're affecting the business, they're going to come to you and be like, hey, you're calling out a lot. Is there anything that we can do to support you? And if it doesn't change, then you may actually get let go because it's like, well, you're never here or we can't rely on you. It's a job. Like you have to show up for your job. If for whatever reason I had to leave early or call out for an audition, that would be the last, like the worst case scenario, the last straw, the last, resort. And that is therefore so rare because of all the other times when I'm handling it maturely that, I have managers tell me all the time, like, yeah, you call out so infrequently. So it's just about managing those circumstances, like to the best of your ability. And then beyond that, it should be so rare that you are doing something that affects the business that they either barely notice or they do notice, but it's in a good way. Like, oh, wow, AJ called out today. That's that's weird. And hopefully hopefully listeners can apply that to their job and it's not just, Apple.
What happens when you can't find a solution?
It depends, obviously, on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes I will just call out. I will just be like, you know what? It's been, 3 months since I called out, and I couldn't find a solution, and I'll just call out, and I won't say anything. I'll just be like, I can't come in today, because you don't have to offer a reason. It's not really required. I mean, maybe different managers at different stores or work differently, but I don't think it's required. You can just call out. But depending on the situation, I will do just that. I will go to a manager and be like, look, I have this audition. I've asked everyone. I can't find anybody to cover my shift, but I'm not going to be here. So I wanted to give you advance notice so that you could make the proper adjustments to make sure that the business is not as affected as it would be otherwise. It's still a solution. It's still me being mature and sort of owning that choice. But especially Apple and the people that work there and the managers that work there are very attuned to or committed to a work-life balance, and they get it. They get it. I had a manager tell me once, when this happened, I was like, I can't find anybody to cover my shift. She was like, just go. And like almost looked like not upset, but just like, why are you talking to me right now? You need to go so you can get to this audition. And I was like, really? And she was like, look, I'm a manager in an Apple store. I'm not a producer of it was like a audition for a TV show or a feature film. I'm not a producer of a TV show. I can't give you that job. Go. So, it was very cool and also helped me make sure that it was framed properly. Like, she's right. I'm not going to book that job if I'm standing there selling a Mac. I'm not. I can only have an opportunity to book it if I actually go.
For people listening, if you can find a job to support you while you build an acting career that has those values, that puts people at the center of the business, man, good for you, and stick with it. Because that's a company that's going to invest in you as much as you're going to invest in it. And it can be, as Apple shows, it can be the big corporations. I mean, all these major corporations are always being attacked for human rights violations and things like that. But I think we can all agree that Apple's definitely on the cleaner side of that, of all that stuff.
Well, hopefully that was helpful, Edgar.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Communication is really what it comes down to, absolutely be, showing up and communicating with everyone. And I love what you said about bringing them a solution. Nobody wants a problem. Everybody wants a solution.
Yeah.
If you can bring solutions, you are valuable to the company.
Exactly. I don't want to be a problem. I don't want to be another thing you got to think about,
Awesome. Well, Edgar, thank you for the question. I hope that helps. And anybody who's listening who has other thoughts on that, how to get in touch with us. Please do. So without further ado, part one of my chat with director Bryan Beasley. This is good stuff. As I said earlier, there's no secrets here. It is really all about hustle, vision, commitment, and who you know and who knows you. So enjoy this interesting journey from Oklahoma through New York to LA as Bryan gets himself established as a director, and enjoy the Hollywood stories, very, very Hollywood stories that he shares with us in this first part. And we'll catch you on the other side. Today we're talking with Bryan Beasley, a photographer and filmmaker in Los Angeles, and Bryan comes to us via our production coordinator, Jen Levin, because Bryan directed a couple of films that she's been involved with, one of which she was in recently called Single Parent Date Night, and another which was a documentary about Twitter. So a lot to talk about between the documentary work, the film work you've done, the theater you've directed, the photography you've done, where you went to school. There's a lot to dig into today. So
thank you for having me.
So we like to usually start kind of at the beginning and get a feel for really what it is that drew you to this industry, because it's not the sanest choice.
No, not at all.
To be here, and why LA versus staying in New York. So let's start with where you grew up, where you were born, and what was that first sort of inkling to be
involved in professional storytelling, as it were?
So I grew up in Oklahoma City. I had kind of a very straightforward and normal upbringing. You know, I think a lot of people, I'm 43 years old, and a lot of people of my generation basically, I think, kind of had the same story where they literally saw Star Wars as a small child, and it just opened my horizons. Like I didn't know anything about movies or filmmaking, but that movie like totally resonated with me, even though I think I was only 3 years old, but you know, all the Spielberg stuff, E.T. and Indiana Jones.
And was it all, you were always drawn to film and not necessarily a different medium? No,
yeah, it was always film. Later down the line, I really got into documentaries, but that wasn't until I got to NYU. And but when I was a kid, yeah, I can remember I saw Ghostbusters, I think 30 times that summer it came out, basically because I have two younger brothers, and my mother would just kick us out of the house. You know, that's, I think 84 was that summer, and there was a multiplex about half a mile away, and we would ride our bikes. She'd give us $20, which was a lot of money, and we could go down there and spend the entire day. And it would be all the other kids from the neighborhood would all be there. We would sing the Ghostbuster theme song while it was on screen, and we would recite the words back to Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd. And then I can remember later on seeing Die Hard, and that like had a huge effect on me in high school. Like I just thought it's the greatest Christmas movie ever made, quite honestly. It goes Die Hard and then A Wonderful Life. Those are the two Christmas movies I watch every year.
In there anyway.
Yeah, that's number 3.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
And A Christmas Story, of course.
A Christmas Story. That's just in the background, though. That's like the screensaver of Christmas. But yeah, so, you know, in high school, I really dove into photography. I was lucky. They had, the school I went to had a dark room. So that kind of opened up a visual medium for myself. I'm very lucky. My parents were very supportive, and we started looking into film schools. And back in the early 90s, there were really only 2 undergraduate programs, NYU and USC. You know, there was a lot of communications programs that you could go to where they kind of would teach film. Oklahoma University. I got into OU, I got waitlisted by SMU, and didn't get into USC, and then got into NYU, which was a huge coup. I mean, it was like that's like one of the moments in my life where I'm like, this is where it turned, you know, the right direction. Because leaving Oklahoma City and spending 4 years in Manhattan and going to NYU Film School, where they literally gave us real film cameras, and we had, you know, Ron Howard was a guest speaker and Martin Scorsese was a guest speaker. So my horizons were, you know, grew significantly, and it was just meeting, my fellow students were kids from Paris and, you know, from all over the world, and everyone, you know, kids from one of my roommates was from San Francisco. The other roommate was from Long Island, and we had very different upbringings, and it was just great. It was the 4 years I spent in New York were pretty fantastic.
Did you ever doubt yourself? Did you ever wonder if this was actually the right path for you?
You know, it's yes and no, where I'd come back to Oklahoma for the summers. The first 2 summers I was in college, I came back because I mow lawns. That was like my Beasley Brothers mowing company, as it was called.
That's amazing.
And yeah, we had a trailer, and both my little brothers.
Yeah, you make good money landscaping.
Oh my God, we made great money. It was like my parents were like, you can't stay home. You have to go get a job. So it was either we flip burgers for nothing, or we could mow lawns and get paid in cash. And we would mow. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but we would mow these huge, like, empty lot fields and get paid like $100.
Yeah,
and it would take half an hour.
And you're outside.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah. So I remember catching up with a lot of the kids I went to high school with, a lot of my buddies, and they'd either gone to OU or OSU, Oklahoma State University, and they just had it was almost like a continuation of high school for them. But the one thing I was definitely jealous of was they were all in fraternities, and the sorority girls, we didn't have anything like that at NYU. Like, I was like, how are you dating this chick? Like, I was like, at NYU, it was like going to work. Like, there was no camp. I mean, there's kind of a campus, but like, there's no football team. There's not school. I mean, it was literally like, I went to 18 years old. I moved to New York, and I went to work. And it was, if you were going to meet people, you had to like go out and meet people. While at the big state schools that all my friends were going to, they had sorority and fraternity parties. And so socially, I was like, am I doing the right thing? Like, everyone's having a good time. And I'm like,
just socially. So you doubted it socially, but not necessarily.
Because the other aspect was, and I mean, I do have, I guess everyone has a little bit of an ego, but like, I would come home to Oklahoma and be like, oh my God, that's so awesome. Like, you live in New York. Like, I was living the dream that a lot of people were afraid. And still to this day, I'll go back to Oklahoma and I have a very tight knit group of kids that I went to high school with. And they're always like, oh man, you were the one that got out.
You were the one that got out. I was just going to say that. You were the one that got out.
I don't know. So there was both elements like that I was pretty focused, and I also knew just how lucky I was to get into NYU. I mean, there was only 300 kids in my class at the film school, and I wasn't gonna squander that. So I took full advantage, especially my last 2 years. I definitely was kind of in a little bit of shell shock, and kind of hiding away from the world a little bit my first 2 years, but the last 2 years I kind of had awakening, going like, I live in one of the greatest cities in the world. Like, why am I not taking advantage of this? And like, and I'm talking about going to museums or going to off-Broadway shows. I mean, just amazing art was all around me, and I really embraced it my last 2 years. So
you have a thesis film that you guys shoot at NYU.
That's right. Yeah. So when I graduated, I did a film called Key to the Crime, which was a 100% blatant ripoff of Quentin Tarantino, who was like my idol at the time. I think Reservoir Dogs came out my junior year, and then Pulp Fiction, I think, hadn't come out yet, but it was, we knew it was on the way. And it was just a very straightforward action comedy with quirky characters. And I kind of thought that that's where my career would go, is that I would be direct, like Die Hard. Like, I just thought that's kind of what I wanted to do, big action blockbusters. It got me some attention, and the other thing is that my last 2 years at NYU, I worked for Sigourney Weaver. I was her personal assistant she'd started a production company. She'd gotten Alien 4, The Resurrection, I think it's called. So that was an internship. And so I told her, I was like, listen, I'll move out to Los Angeles. I got my little film under my arm. I'll move out to Los Angeles, but I need a job. And she's like, great, I can get you a PA gig on Alien Resurrection.
So I'm sorry, how did you connect with her?
So one of my really good friends at NYU is a guy named Louis Leterrier. He's actually did go on to become a big action director. And his godmother was Sigourney. And she had just started this production company. 20th Century Fox had given her all this money, and so she wanted to get into producing, and she just needed an intern. And so Louis already I think he had some other gig or wasn't interested. So he introduced me to her. We went to dinner. I literally told her how my Ghostbusters story. I was like, I went to Ghostbusters
This was meant to be.
It really was. Yeah. And then the other thing was the two things we talked about. There's a great skit. Actually, it's Dana Carvey's first skit where he talks about chopping broccoli. Have you ever heard of this? He sings a song. Sigourney Weaver plays his girlfriend. She comes and she breaks up with him. And he's like, I'm going to write a song. And he talks about how she's chopping broccoli, which I just thought as a kid was so funny. So those are the two things that I would talk to her about. And I guess I endeared myself to her. This little backwards kid from Oklahoma. So I interned for her for 2 years, and then actually the great thing was I got to pass it on to one of my good friends. And the internship lasted for 15 years, and every new intern would pass it on to somebody else. I graduated NYU in '96, and I think they shot that film the fall of '96, and I came right out.
That's awesome. Because one of my questions was, a lot of people say like, where's the missing link to this career? Like, you hear so many stories where it's like, oh yeah, I was cleaning carpets and then moved to LA and then got a role in a James Cameron film. And it's like, whoa,
yeah.
How did this happen? So it's cool to hear that, again, it's about relationships and friends who have family members who are looking for people to help them out.
That whole thing was definitely a lesson in kind of how Hollywood works. Yeah, and Louis was just he was just a kid that I met that was on my floor. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, wow.
He was just a strange kid from Paris that we kind of all made fun of.
Did everybody know that his aunt or whatever it was?
No, his dad is a director out of Paris, and I think it had gotten around, and he directed one. Do you remember the Emmanuel films? They were kind of like risque. They're not porn, but they're not porn.
I don't think I came
so
across
okay.
those.
Well, in the late '80s, early '80s, like they put out these French films that were erotic films, and his dad had directed one of them. So we used to mock him a lot. But I also was in class with. Do you remember Jerry O'Connell, who was like?
Oh yeah.
So he was my grade at NYU too, and I think he kind of stole the thunder. Everyone was like, "Oh, it's the fat kid from Stand by Me." So so poor Louis got to fly under the radar a little bit. Like, but they've both gone on to do great things.
Wow. So you met Sigourney Weaver, you endeared yourself to her, as you said, and then eventually you had that was your ticket out to LA and to start immediately working in the industry.
Yeah, I was making $350 a week. I living at Park La Brea. I thought I was king of the world, man. I had a wonderful apartment in Manhattan on 12th Street and 4th Avenue. I had two really great roommates, but we lived in a shoebox. I mean, we literally lived in a tiny, tiny apartment. And I remember coming out to Los Angeles. I spent one winter here, and I was like, I'm never leaving. I love Los Angeles. And NYU, I think, especially when I was there, had a bit of a chip on its shoulder of like, we make independent filmmakers. We make the Spike Lees, we make the Scorseses. We're not USC. They make the George Lucases. And I came out here and I was like, screw that. You can. I want to be in Hollywood. I want to be out here in LA. And the weather had a lot to do with that, because I kind of thought of myself as like the gateway to the West, because all my classmates would come out and spend a month on my couch at Park La Brea, as they would kind of either they acclimated to LA and they loved it, or they thought it was too shallow or whatever their problems were, and they'd go back to New York. I instantly hit the ground running, and I've been here 20 years, and it was Halloween of 2016 was my 20-year anniversary in Los Angeles. Yeah.
Wow, awesome. So when your internship with Sigourney Weaver's production company was up, which you said, I think it was about 2 years.
Yeah, as soon as I graduated, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So 2 years later, you're in LA, and then do you just not have a job, and you're then looking for something?
Yeah.
What happened next?
So I did the PA job on Alien Resurrection. Only lasted 2 or 3 months or whatever. And there was another girl that I went to NYU with, who Marissa Katz, her family lives out here. Her parents kind of took me under their wing, and I met some other young people. And there's a guy named Matt Kaminsky who worked at Viacom Productions as a runner. And it just kind of worked out that the PA job ended, and they were looking for a new runner. So I did that for about a year and a half. And what was amazing about that is that they had offices at Universal Studios, but Viacom Productions was in Westwood. And so we were constantly running dailies of such hit TV shows as Sabrina the Teenage Witch and Diagnosis Murder, running those dailies to the likes of Fred Silverman and Dean Hargrove and other big 80s TV producers. But it was amazing because I got to learn my way around Los Angeles.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I mean, it was like, I still commute in the Valley, and I'm like, we take Moore Park and take a left here. Like, I still, like, my little brain will kick in, and I had the Thomas Guide and the whole thing.
This was before the era of smartphones and GPSs.
Like, we had pagers. Like, I can remember, like, if you got a page and it said 911, you had to stop immediately and get to a payphone because somebody has requested a tape, and we have to get back to the dub room and get these dailies that no one was actually watching out to people.
So you went from PA, which is everything from like just getting coffee to like moving.
I was just Sigourney's kid on the set. Like, I did whatever she needed. I just
so you went from that to being a runner.
Yeah,
but like, how did you transition into photographing celebrities like Dave Grohl and William Shatner, and then also becoming a director?
Yeah. So obviously being young, you're just, full spunk and you're ready to go. And I definitely had like, I'm going to come out to LA and I'm just going to take over. And I had my little 16 millimeter film, and I can remember renting projection rooms and inviting, like, calling CAA and calling agents and be like, hey, I'm screening my student film that I almost got a Student Academy Award with. And like, 10% of them would send their assistants, you know what I'm saying? And so there'd be like 3 people in the room, and those kids were maybe a year older than me. And they're like watching this film, and they're like, okay, oh, well, thanks. And it was a real kind of eye opener. I was like, oh, like this industry just doesn't, it's not easy. You have, you know what I'm saying? Like I knew that there was going to be a lot of work that had to be done, and I had to pay the
Actually,
rent.
I want to pause on that for one quick second, because I think that's something that a lot of people who move out to LA run into. They come from being sort of a big fish in a small pond,
right?
And they come out here and realize there's a whole different context, a whole different set of tastes that goes into things, and that can be a really rude awakening for some people.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of knew. Obviously, it wasn't going to be easy, but I definitely thought that I was going to make a bigger dent a lot sooner. Yeah. And, you know, I definitely got disillusioned with being, you know, running tapes for these, you know, hit TV shows, but very mediocre in my standards. It wasn't what I wanted to do. And the next thing that came along was, why don't I have a photography background? Why don't I start shooting actors' headshots? So in 2000, I left the runner job. Actually, I got fired. And
oh wait, you got to tell this story. How'd you get fired from the runner job?
I also very, very Hollywood story. There was my point person who handled all the runners, and then there was her boss, who was kind of our boss, obviously boss's boss. And we only met with him. I only met with him twice, and it was once a year. And he usually would just kind of like, "Hey, great work," da da da. Like he didn't pay any attention to what we were doing. So the second, I'd been there almost a year and a half. The shows were getting ready to go into hiatus, and it just meant that our job would just get real easy because we weren't doing a whole lot. But they weren't, you know, they had to keep us around for small things. And so I legitimately thought he was calling me in to promote me. And the guy who was right above me, one of the other runners who was literally hired a year before me, he was a total stress case, and I think he drove people nuts. And in my brain, I was like, I can't believe they're promoting me over Derek. Like, that guy's been here longer than me, and they're this is how wrong I was. So then I come in, I sit in this guy's big office in Westwood, and he goes, Bryan, we're making some changes. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, and today's your last day. And I was just like, what? It literally was like I physically got sick to my stomach. I was like, because I considered myself to be a really hard worker, and like if there was something wrong, I felt that I was very, very proactive in getting, you know, fixing whatever the problem was. And so I kept, you know, my dad has always been like, if, you know, take a life lesson out of everything. You know, if life throws you a curveball, take a lesson from that. So I can remember sitting in his office and being like, why are you firing me? Like, how can I learn from this so that I don't make this mistake again?
You asked him that
flat out? Flat out. And
awesome.
he literally just goes, we know things. And I was just like, what does that mean? You know, like, it's not like I had a $400 a week job. It wasn't like I'm embezzling. You know what I'm saying? Like, right. I stole videotape. Like, it was absurdity. So I kept going, well, no. And I wouldn't leave his office. I was like, you need to tell me why you're firing me. And it wasn't about like, I'm going to sue you. It was like, I need to know how I better myself as a person. And he just kept repeating, we know things, and today's your last day, da da da. Long story short is that I was still friends with all the guys there. When the hiatus came back, they came back online. I went to lunch with one of them, and he goes, dude, do you know why you got fired? And I was like, why? He's like, his nephew had just graduated college, and you were the low man on the totem pole, and that guy needed a job because he was coming out of college.
Wow.
It was complete nepotism. So I was out. They didn't need me for the, you know, when the shows were in hiatus, and they hired his nephew to take my job.
So between
but it was the best thing that happened to me because I literally walked out of his office. I walked into the lobby, and I remember picking up the phone, and I had heard that this kid, Kevin Jordan, who I went to NYU with, who was decently close with, was getting ready to direct his first film here in LA. And I called this other guy, Ryan Rothmeyer, who is a good friend of mine. And I go, Ryan, you're producing Kevin's film. He's like, I don't have a job. I'll work for free. He goes, we need a second AD. I was like, fine, I'm in. And I started, like 2 days later, I was second AD on a film called Goat on Fire and Smiling Fish.
Wow, awesome.
Which is a great little independent film you can find on Netflix. It won the Toronto Film Festival. I really look at getting fired as besides getting into NYU, one of the best things that happened to me, because I had just fallen into kind of a, like, oh, this is easy. Like, I'm getting a good paycheck. The other stuff will come, but it wasn't going to come. I needed to get fired. I needed to get literally a fire lit under my ass. And I haven't had a day job since.
Isn't that funny how it's, I think everybody has a story sort of along those lines where they go, this moment that could have ended my life ended up being the biggest gift I could have possibly gotten.
Yeah, it definitely, like, and I'm not going to lie, I was like, how am I going to pay my rent? Like, I mean, it was definitely I remember coming out of his office and just being like in a daze, like, how did that just happen? But it definitely was like one of the better things that happened to me. And then, so then when that film ended, that's when I started my photography company.
Hey folks, welcome back. Like the last couple of interviews, and with Trevor, I am at the disadvantage of not having been able to attend this one, and therefore I have not heard it. But I'm really excited. I read through the notes that you posted, Trevor, and it sounds like you said, like one hell of a story, you know?
Yeah, it's pretty cool, man. It's pretty cool. Yeah, part 2 is got more good stuff, and Bryan has been described as an actor's director, and so we really talk about what that means to him and what that means to the actors he worked with, and it's pretty enlightening stuff, so stay tuned.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, picks of the week. I love this part of the episode. Your pick of the week is a poem by Oriah. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, I don't think it's her birth name, but she has a connection or an upbringing with the Native Americans. I was going to say the Native people of America, but the Native Americans, and derived this name. I think the full name she goes by is Oriah Mountain Dreamer. So that gives you an indication of, you know, the kind of connection to Native culture that she has. She's an author. She's got a few books and a bunch of stuff on Sounds True, which is a pick of the week of mine from a few months back. So if you would like to, you know, jump into sort of the audiobook world, this might be a great place to start, and a great reminder about Sounds True. So her name is Oriah. OriahMountainDreamer.com is her website. But on the website, and I was considering reading it, but we don't have that enough time for that. So I'm not going to do that today. But on her website, one of the first things you'll see on the left-hand side of the home page is one of the most beautiful poems I have ever heard in my entire life. And it has touched the soul of every person who I know who has read it, or every person I have read it to. I hope the universality of it extends to our listeners, and that you get just as much out of it as I did. The poem itself is really my pick of the week, but you know, it may lead you to investigate some of her other writings. But
yeah, I've been just sort of glancing through it as you've been talking, and wow, this verse sticks out to me. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours and mine, and still stand at the edge of the lake and shout to the silver of the full moon, yes. That is...
Yeah.
Oof, wow.
Yeah.
Yours and mine. Failure, yours and mine.
It's like a poem that encapsulates some of the emotional intelligence that is severely lacking in this world. It is a poem that will expose ego, you know? And so anyway, please enjoy.
That's beautiful. Right on.
What is your pick of the week, my friend?
So I alluded to this a few, maybe like a dozen episodes now ago. It's a book by a woman named Dr. Melanie Joy. And I remember I said like, oh, you know, when I read this book, I'll report back and let you guys know what it's like. And the book is called Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and Wear Cows, An Introduction to Carnism. And it is exactly what you think it's about. It's a psychological deep dive into this, what she calls an invisible belief system. And she calls that invisible belief system carnism. And, you know, in our society, we have people who eat, you know, no animal products at all, and we call them vegans. We have people who eat some animal products, and we frequently call them some form of vegetarian. We have people then that also eat animals, and we don't have a label for them. They're just called normal people. But she really starts to unpack what that means. What does that mean when we cringe at the thought of having a golden retriever carcass carved up and put into our beef stew, but we're fine with it being a cow or a pig? Like, what is it that drives that? And carnism is the label she applies to it. If veganism is a thing, then why should eating animals not be a thing? And she calls it carnism, and it's just she brings up a lot of interesting psychological principles. She's a certified psychologist and sociologist and does all sorts of work on this kind of thing. And it's a very difficult book to read at sometimes. If you want to know the truth of where your carnitas burrito came from, this is a good book to read. If you don't want to know the truth, then don't read this. But it's just I found it really interesting. The book, it's a little emotionally charged, but it's much more about like, here's what's happening in our brains when we plug into this culture that values these things and completely doesn't value these things and doesn't value these other things to the point where it fights to make them invisible, and we train ourselves to numb ourselves out to the reality of it. It's very interesting. So people listening to this know that I'm a pretty impassioned animal rights person. I'm not a big fan of the idea of killing and eating animals now that I've sort of learned what I've learned. So if you are at all interested in that, this is a great book to check out. Like I said, if you don't want to know some of the gory details, not only of what happens every moment of every day in slaughterhouses around the world, but also what happens in your own mind every time you decide to eat a burger and pet your dog at the same time, then this isn't a good book to read. But I found it really, really interesting and fascinating. It's a fairly short book, but a deep dive, man. It'll open your eyes for sure.
I appreciate the disclaimer.
Yeah. I never want to like force this kind of thing on people, but I will say somebody had to sort of force it on me to get me to pay attention. So it's a fine line that we walk. I want to respect others' beliefs, but at the same time, it's like when you really connect to what's happening, it's worse than your worst nightmares. What's happening right now to defenseless animals that think and feel just as deeply as your pets do, and as deeply as you do. And it's like when you really connect to that, it's like you want to do everything you can to stop it, and that often comes off in a really abrasive way to people who aren't as acquainted with that as you are. So that's been a big struggle for me lately. So I'm just I'll share this book, recommend everybody read it, but with that disclaimer, because I understand that not everybody's ready for that kind of thing. There's actually a whole chapter in there on witnessing and how important she feels witnessing is to the human experience and to culture and to our mission as compassionate beings. And it's beautiful, difficult, very difficult, but beautiful. So check it out. It's a powerful book. Cool. So that is The Invitation, a poem by Oriah, and Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and Wear Cows by Dr. Melanie Joy. And then we have a listener pick that comes our way from Tara Patterson. This was something she shared with us a few weeks ago when we were really talking about this whole Donald Trump thing that's happening in our country right now.
This whole Donald Trump thing. It's just
I don't know what else to call it at this point. I turn on the news and are you kidding me?
I'm on board. I'm embellishing actually what you're saying, because it's a thing.
Yeah,
it's a thing that's happening. It really is.
And I'm going to admit I have actively been tuning in to traditionally conservative news channels because I really want to see what is it that people see in this guy as a leader, and you trust in his taste and everything. And it's just, anyway, Tara Patterson sent us this link to a 30-minute audio recording with Abraham Hicks. And for anybody who's familiar with Esther Hicks and Abraham Hicks and all that stuff, Esther Hicks is this woman who can channel this sort of otherworldly being. I know this sounds nuts, but if you check out some of her work, it makes a little more sense. She can channel this sort of infinite intelligence and wisdom, and basically she does these sessions where people gather and she sort of shares this wisdom, and somebody was asking her about Donald Trump and all this stuff, and what she shares, or what Abraham shares, I guess via her, is pretty profound stuff. You know, it's all about the nature of personal reality and how we all create our own reality, and we are all responsible for the results in the world, and we, you know, what we focus on expands and all that stuff. It's really interesting, and it definitely does drive home the idea that we are all constantly creating this reality, and we can change it in the blink of an eye with our thoughts. And I know that sounds super new agey and out of touch with things, but give it a listen. It may pique your interest.
Anything helps at this point.
Anything else you want to squeeze in before we wrap this up?
No, man. Let's do this. Today's episode of Inside Acting was produced and co-hosted by yours truly, AJ Meyer, and of course, Trevor Algad. Jen Levin is our production coordinator. Gadali Grubrick is our marketing web director. Deborah Smith is our community manager, and Fern Lim designed our logo.
You can sign up for our weekly email dispatch and listen to all of our episodes at our website, insideacting.net. We're also on social media and pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. And if you got a minute, please go ahead and leave us a review on iTunes. It really helps a lot.
Special thanks to our sponsors, Rehearsal Pro and VO2GoGo.com, and thanks to you, of course, our listeners. You are the reason for the season. You're the reason why we do these podcasts. You can visit our website to subscribe to our weekly newsletter, get links to everything we talked about in this episode, and if you'd like, support the continued production of the show with a small or large financial contribution. You can make a one-time, no strings attached, tax-deductible contribution via PayPal, Square, or Venmo, or sign up as an Inside Acting member for just $7 a month. Visit insideacting.net to learn more and show us some love.
And that's it for episode 267 of Inside Acting. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next week. And in the meantime, be the solution.